Hey everybody, coming to you today from my dining room, but I decided to use this awesome virtual background from NPR, the Little Desk series, which I love, and I was feeling kind of jazzy about it today, so I thought I'd throw in my virtual background. Um, so today on Time for Tea, we are going to discuss the end of Sweet Divinity and hear a poem, talk about our next read, and yeah. So I usually start with something about myself. So my name is Megan Pruitt-Kuhn. I probably should have said that, and I'm excited that you decided to join me today for Time for Tea. So today I thought what I might share about you or with you about myself is something that we'll talk about while we're discussing the end of Sweet Divinity as well, because it will come up. But actually, let me start by saying here's something fun about me. I love to color my hair. So actually, we're just gonna go with this one for now. So I love to color my hair. My hair currently has some aqua and pink in it. It's kind of hard to see on the video, but I've been coloring my hair. I first colored my hair fun, funky colors when I was in high school. I think I talked about that last week, that the first time I colored my hair was when I didn't get to go to the formal. And so my friend Ashley and I had a girls' night. And as part of that, we colored my hair. And when we colored my hair, it turned out bright orange. And my hair was super long back then, down to my waist. And this is not my natural hair color. My natural hair color is sort of a medium brown. And so just the top of my head turned bright red. And it was supposed to be auburn. So didn't learn my lesson. And maybe the next year, a couple years later, I got a box of burgundy. This is in the 90s. It's like I really wanted that deep burgundy hair. And so I dyed it again and hot pink, just on the top. So I made some unfortunate decisions over time with hair color. But so I started having mine professionally done, which is what you should do if you decide you're going to color your hair. And gosh, I started several years ago and just playing around. I've been brunette, like a dark brown. I've been a super light blonde, all kinds of shades in the middle as well. And then I love to do colors. So if you follow me for a while, you know, my very favorite ever was when my hair was sort of like a sunset. You can look back on my Instagram or Twitter for pictures of that. Actually, probably just Instagram. And it was like all these different shades of pink and some sort of orange and a little hint of purple. And I felt like a sunset, and I loved that. That's been my favorite. I've gone pretty much almost all pink before. I've done a whole head of purple, did that last December. And so over quarantine, when quarantine first began, I got a wild hair, and I knew I shouldn't have done this. I knew it. I did it anyway. And my husband and I went out and bought boxes of like funky colors for our hair. He got silver and I got powder puff pink. And so I colored my hair and it turned into this like, to say it was strawberry blonde is not accurate, but that's the closest descriptor I can come to, like a 6 strawberry blonde. And so this time when I went and had my hair done, because I had damaged it so much with that box, I ended up with aqua where it was supposed to be purple. But fortunately, I like aqua and I'm kind of into it, so it works out. I'm a huge fan of hair grows back. Like cut off my hair, color my hair. Let's have fun. Let's explore. Let's do some expression because hair grows back. So you can look forward to that in coming months. The like metamorphosis of my hair color. So anyway, so that's something I suppose I think it's kind of fun about me. So today we're going to start by finishing our discussion of Sweet Divinity. And I'm really excited to discuss this with you today. So, oh gosh, there's so much that happens here. Where to begin? Okay, so, and I may have said this before, but I think it bears repeating today, that the novel first ended where, at Thanksgiving. That was the end of the book. The end, everybody's together. happy Thanksgiving. We can deal with Richard. Great. And I had a nice little, I thought it was such a great line at the end. And gosh, where is it? The end of chapter 15, I think. Yeah, there's nothing like a good meal and family to help people put aside their differences. By the end of the night, Jeanette had even put a dollop of fresh whipped cream on Richard's pecan pie for him. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of hurt around that table. Plenty of hurt and plenty of hard feelings. There's also a lot of love. And that was sort of where it ended. It had a different ending. It was more of a clincher, but basically the same. And I really wanted to have a scene where Richard, where we see and we know that everything's going to be all right with Richard and Sylvie and their relationship. And I wanted to show that Amanda Jane, she wants to co-parent with him. She wants him in her daughter's life, which is really nice. It doesn't always work out that way in real life, and sometimes it shouldn't work out that way. But that's what I wanted for them here. So, and Thanksgiving, it's food and it's family. It's all the things that make up this book. So I have to take this background away. It's weird, like, woo, sorry, distracted. And so that's where it ended. And then I had an agent from New York who was working on rewrites with me tell me that there needed to be something more. There needed to be some kind of big showdown. And so that's when I added the wedding at the end. And, you know, it's funny because I had a friend say to me, I was lamenting about how I didn't know what to do. And I agreed that it was kind of like a full stop ending without, I don't know, just kind of like, and in the story. And I didn't love that either, but I didn't know what else remained in their story to be told. And so I was talking to a friend, and my friend said to me, oh my gosh, Megan, like, you've got bakers. She's a baker. She's in the South. You need to have a big gay wedding. And I thought, oh my goodness, you're absolutely right. Because at the time I was writing this is when there were cases going through the court systems about people refusing to bake wedding cakes for same-sex unions. And so I knew that was a hot topic. And I also knew it was one that was probably going to continue, unfortunately. So I jumped on that, and oh, how it flowed once I knew. So that was really exciting. And so that's how I ended up with the ending that we have now. And I do think it's much better. It has one final kind of showdown with Beulah. It goes with the theme of sort of Old South, New South, and it plays into the theme I'm looking for in the next book. It allows Jesse and Amanda Jane to have a nice moment at the end. And I think it ends with a lot of hope. Not just for the family, because I think the Thanksgiving did that, but just sort of a generalized hope. And her musings about, you know, the town changing. But I also knew, so then I ended it there at the end of the wedding, and where she's, where Jesse says to her, I'm going to marry you one day. And she says, I know I'm going to marry you too. And I was like, oh, end of story. But I keep going back to the fact that this is not just a romance novel, like it's something more. And I think if it's a love story, then it's a love story between Amanda Jane, the place she comes from, or maybe even between Amanda Jane and her mom. And so I knew that we needed to go back and have it end at the farm with her and her mom on the porch. I knew that's what I needed. And one of my very favorite endings to any piece of literature is the ending of a short story by Alice Walker called Everyday Use. I really recommend that you read this story, Everyday Use by Alice Walker. It's fantastic. She's a Black writer, so there's a lot in there that I, for one, will never experience or understand, but it also has a universal theme of heritage and memory and the role that memory serves, and how we often take objects and attach our emotions and our memories to them. And so it raises questions like, you know, if you lost a photo album today, does that mean you would forget everybody that's in the photo album? Well, of course not. And so that story is fantastic. Everyday Use by Alice Walker. But I love the ending of that story because it ends with a mother and this is not a spoiler. It ends with a mother and daughter sitting on their front steps, and it says, or Walker writes that they said they were just enjoying. And I just love that, the simplicity of just being there, being with someone, not having to speak, and just enjoying the moment and where you are. I think that we could all use some of that. So I love the ending of that story. And so I wanted to capture this same kind of ease at the end, that there's resolution. And, but anyway, I did have one agent tell me that she loved the book, but she wasn't fulfilled by the ending because she wanted Jesse and Amanda Jane to get married at the end. And I disagree, because I think that there's more to their story. There's some other things they need to work out. This would be like a bachelor kind of wedding here. Like, you know, you meet somebody and you fall in love and then boom. And that works for some, but I think there's more they need to work out for sure between the two of them. And they're going to do some of that in the sequel. And I didn't want to do that. Amanda Jane's had this beautiful journey of finding herself. And I feel like having them get married at the end would in fact turn this into, oh, well, the romance was the primary plot point. And it's not. It's a secondary plot point. It contributes to the main arc of Amanda Jane in recognition of herself and who she is. So anyway, so that's how the last bit of this book evolved. All right, so a couple places I want to talk about in particular. Well, let's see. So I needed conflict between Amanda Jane and Jesse. And, you know, it's hard to know what it would be, because he's not going to say something totally untoward to her. That'd be out of character for him. He's a gentle guy, careful, slow moving. And I didn't want her to like fly off the handle with him. Like, I would like for their relationship to be a healthy one. And I don't want the big drama to be in their relationship, because he's very much a sort of a safe place for her to be all those parts of herself that she had let go. But I did need them to have an argument. And when I was younger, I certainly in all my relationships was a jealous person. And so I can understand those feelings. And so that's why I chose what I did with the ex-girlfriend. I'm sorry, timeout. Shout out on page 205 to the Alphabet Soup Club, which was told to me by a dear friend. Her name is Louisa, and Louisa was telling a story one day. We were all in class, and she told the story about when she was in elementary school in the Alphabet Soup Club, and I was like, can I use that? She said, yes, it's in here. So thanks, Louisa. I love you. So anyway, so I needed them to have a fuss, and I wanted it to be when she's finally about to make it on her own. You know, so often we get in a place and we're doing a lot of work on ourselves, and then, you know, right when you think you've got it, something just swoops in and interrupts itself. And it's how you respond to that, I think, that really firms up that bit of your character, that last bit of, is this real? Is this change real? Is who I am now strong enough? And so I wanted that. I wanted that for her. I wanted the experience of it for her. I have to first talk about the country fair, because this is one of my favorite scenes in the book. And it's because when I was a kid, going to the country fair was my absolute favorite. I loved it. And I still love going. Last fall, actually, when my grandmother was suffering from cancer in October, I went over to go to the country fair with my mom and my grandmother. And it was the best. We had an amazing time. We had a great time. We took my son, who was just 5 at the time, just turned 5. And we had the most amazing time. And my grandmother is somebody who really loved food. So one of my favorite memories from that day. So we always go, story time now. So when I was a kid, I always insisted on eating at the United Methodist Church. They have like a barbecued chicken, baked bean slaw roll dinner that you could get. Love that. And then like later when I was in high school, the recipe changed or something and it wasn't amazing anymore. And I was sad. And, there's barbecue places there, but we go to those barbecue places when I'm at home. So you want something different. And so for the last decade or so, we have gone to a little house. It's across the street. So when you go to the country fair, you drive down a road. It goes over a bridge, and under the bridge is the river. It's the Conasauga River, which is also the river that ran in the backyard of our farm. It still does run when it was our farm. And so it was called the festival is called Prater's Mill Country Fair because there's a mill there that dates from the 1800s, and they keep it going and running, so you can go in and tour it, and it's very similar to the book. And you can see them making grits or cornmeal, and it's wonderful. And I love the smell in there. I just love it. But it was powered by this waterfall that's in the river. And so when I was younger, the wheel would still be turning and the waterfall would still be powering the mill. That's changed now with weather changes and climate changes that we have. There's not enough water to really run the mill anymore. But you can still go touring there. And then when I was little, you would go to the back and you could either do like a horse trail ride, but they also had canoes. You could canoe up and down the river, which I always wanted to do. My family would never let us do it. They said it was scary. But anyway, and what you also do, which is in the book, is you go in and there's a local quilters organization, and they're always making a quilt using traditional methods. So they have a frame that hangs from the ceiling and is wooden, and they have the quilt in there and they're sewing it by hand, and then you buy raffle tickets to win the quilts. And my amazing mother has been buying raffle tickets for this quilt since 1983, and she's never won the quilt. And I want so badly for her to win that quilt. Like, she wants that quilt bad. Like, she buys a handful of tickets every year, and it's never happened. Just one day. But anyway, so bridge, river runs underneath, the mill's over here, and then you go under the bridge to the other side. So it'd be across the river or across the street. And over there is where they had the Civil War encampment for many years. They don't have that anymore. They have a tractor show where people bring out all the tractors, and I mean like antique tractors, and it's so cool. They've got them all running. They have an antique caboose over there, and so you can tour through that. There's a barn where they used to have a lot of farm animals in there, like little chicks you could hold, and goats and sheep and cows and horses. But in recent years, the local pet shelter has brought animals there, and you can adopt while you're there, and then they do like pony rides outside. But my point being, also over there, they have the best restaurant. So it's in the old general store, which was on this property, and it's the original building, also from the 1800s. You walk in, it's so cool. They've got all these the old cash registers there, like it's like been preserved. It's so cool, you guys. And you walk in, and it's a buffet they have set up on the counter of the general store. And the first thing you see, of course, when you walk in are all the pies and cakes and goodies. And so obviously you get that. And then you go down and you order what you want. And I always get the chicken and dressings, homemade dressing, so good. And a corn fritter. If you've never had a corn fritter, it's so good. It's like fried cornbread patty. And then I get collard greens, but they have like black-eyed peas, and when I get yams, candied sweet potatoes, oh, so good. And then you get your cornbread or your roll or whatever it is. And so we always go over there and have our lunch. And so obviously with lunch, you have your cake or pie or whatever, and then you go back across the street, and then you get your second dessert. which for me is, oh gosh, the apple dumpling. They make fresh apple dumplings, and you guys, they're the best. I should probably note that I had the homemade ice cream earlier because I had it sort of like a breakfast, like a brunch of homemade ice cream. But so one of my favorite memories from this past year is my mom, my grandmother, and I, and we're there at the country fair, and my grandmother had done some shopping, and I had too, my mom, and because there's all kinds of craft booths set up, and they're just amazing. And we're sitting on a hill, a little slope, and my grandmother comes over and she's got her apple dumpling in one hand and her ice cream in the other. And I was like, good for you. And she was like, yeah, you only live once. And so there she sat, and I have a picture of her sitting on the ground with these two bowls, like overflowing with sweets. And she was so happy. And then they have like a shed nearby, or like a covered stage area. And so there was some fiddling going on, some clogging, and we just had the most lovely time. It was wonderful. And the craftsmanship there is so great. But in fact, today, my cup that I have my tea in today is a handmade pottery piece that I bought at the country fair several years ago. So I loved it and purchased it there. So they have there's pottery, there's metalworking, blacksmithing, needlepoint, there's just everything. When I was a kid, I would always go in and get Divinity candy from the ladies of the Shiloh Baptist Church. So yummy. And I would get Mississippi mud cake from, it was another Methodist church. And then I always went to the Sandman, and the Sandman would have all these different kinds of sand. And he was this little old man he always wore overalls and wrinkly fingers. And you got a bottle, and you put in different colors of sand. You would tell him what to put in, and he would scoop it and put it in for you. And then he would let you hold the wire, like a piece of copper, and he held it with you, and you could put it in and twist and lift up and make designs in your sand. And he would help you figure out how to make the most beautiful designs. And I loved that. That's what I think of when I think of the country fair. And then we go watch the rainbow. They were called the Rainbow Dixie Cloggers, but so we go watch that too. And so when I think about growing up, that fair is of utmost importance to me. It's so pivotal. We went twice a year, Mother's Day and Columbus Day weekend. Now they only do it on Columbus Day weekend. And I really wanted to preserve that in there. There have been many times when they almost shut down the fair just because of funding. So I want to make sure it's captured forever. And so obviously Amanda Jane needed to have her culinary show down there. And I think it's important that she doesn't win. I mean, you can't win them all, and we don't win them all. And that's okay too, right? It's about showing up and trying. So, all right. So that part I really love. Let's talk about the wedding. Okay, well, let's see. Okay, so, oh my goodness, come now. Come on, Meg, you know your own book? Okay, so, as I mentioned before, I wanted to address some issues in this book as well. I am a person who, I love all people. It's hard to love some individuals, and that's a struggle. But I think that it's our calling to love people. And so I wanted to address that, and not in a way that was going to, beat you over the head, but I wanted to do that, to show that all people deserve love and have dignity. I mentioned in here too, when she makes the I never say this correctly, and I apologize. Well, let's just say when she makes the Jewish pastry, how there aren't very many Jewish families in their town. And when I was really young, my mom got married to a man who was Jewish, and we lived in my hometown, and I lived with them obviously for a little while, and then went back to the farm. The marriage didn't last. He was very unhappy in our town and wanted to go back to New Jersey where his family was. And my mom did not want to go to New Jersey. So it was a short-lived romance. But while we were in my hometown, and I would also say that he was an artist and very not a stereotypical super masculine man. And so when I was very little, he got pulled over in my town and for speeding downtown, and he ended up getting arrested. He didn't have his driver's license on him, and you get a ticket for that, but he got arrested, and we had to go. I remember going to the jail to get him out with my mom, and she was so upset, and she's like, because he's Jewish. It's because he's Jewish and because he doesn't fit this mold of, masculinity. I think they probably thought he was gay, and his name reflects his ethnic makeup. And so, I remember being little and knowing that this was wrong, that what had happened to him was not right. And so, yeah, that's always stuck with me, and no wonder he wanted to leave. So I put that little note in there just as a reference. And, I tried to explore some issues with race in this town as well. And then I realized that I really want to say something as well about the LGBTQIA community. It's Pride Month. Let me just pause for a moment because I am all prided out today. And shout out to Michael's for having an awesome Pride section. So I've got my Pride t-shirt on today, my Pride buttons, and Pride plans, because my child and I went berserk in the Michael's Pride section. There was a sale. I know the old saying, you'll go broke buying things on sale, and that's me. So anyway, so I want to just pause for a second and wish a happy Pride to all of my friends and acquaintances, and those of you I don't know who are part of the community who may be watching right now. Happy Pride. I stand with you as an ally. So I knew that there was a statement to be made there, but I want to handle it in an authentic way. And the truth is that when I was growing up, I never knew anyone who was out. No one who proclaimed that they were gay, bisexual, pansexual, asexual. And it was something it was the time and the place in which I grew up that you really just didn't talk about that. And I don't remember having much feeling on it one way or the other, because I'm also one that, if it's not interfering with me, then, but I do remember that I did, from my experiences at church, I had been somewhat formed into some feelings, not negative, not hateful feelings, but feelings of pity for people who were part of this demographic. And it wasn't until I went to college and I had a friend named Jonathan, he's still my friend, who's part of the community. And I asked him, I said, can we go to lunch one day? I have questions. I want to learn. I want to know. And he was like, yeah. So we went to lunch. I asked him many questions, many of which I'd probably be really embarrassed to say that I asked now. And he talked to me and I listened. And I think that today, I'm going to write a blog about this at some point soon. Today, what we're really missing is we're not listening to each other. We don't listen. We don't listen to people talk about their experiences. I'm not talking about not listening to other people's political views, blah, 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 right? This isn't about politics. This is about human decency and humanity. And I want to be really clear about that too. I've been accused of being political on my social media, and I don't, you know, sometimes, yeah, I'll post some political things, but a lot of the times I'm really careful with what I post because I believe in listening. I believe in listening. I believe in dialogue. And I don't want to ever post anything which suggests otherwise or which can be interpreted as otherwise. But I also like to post people and share people's stories, sharing it forward, people who have shared their stories publicly. So, and I don't see that as political. I also don't see pride as political. I see it as human decency and equality. So lest you go later and say, oh, that time for tea was really political. No, I'm not planning on talking about politics at all. I'm just talking about people and people's stories. So I myself have been educated and have grown a lot because of the people that I've met. Putting a human face to things we don't know or don't understand is really important too. The most important thing is that we listen. And there's a difference between hearing and listening. And I'll write more about this on the blog, but you know, I hear a lot of things. I hear sirens come through my neighborhood still, because we're still grappling with COVID. So I hear those. And I have definitely sat with someone and they've been talking and I've heard them, but I wasn't listening. So we need to listen. And listening means not sitting there thinking about what you're going to say next, like thinking about your comeback to whatever someone's going to say. Listening means listening with open ears, open heart, open mind. It's important. So, so I wanted to present a story in here that is a lot. I want to address this issue in a way that explored that there are a lot of people who just, they don't know. They don't know people who belong to the community. They don't know stories even of people. And so it's hard to make judgment calls on things when you don't know them. So I wanted to present that in here a bit, like with Beulah. She's, you know, she spouts off a lot, but she doesn't know people. And so I didn't want her to come across as a villain in this, but more of someone who has a lot to learn. And so that's what I wanted for her. I also wanted to show Amanda Jane as someone who had very little faith in her community being open and loving to all and inclusive. And then to find out that in fact, there's more to that. I have so many friends from where I grew up who are, you know, very progressive, and that surprises me. I mean, I would say that I came from like the buckle on the Bible belts, but and that everyone's just so conservative where I live. And there are a lot of conservatives, and I love them, and they're my family and my friends, and I love them. But I've been surprised at how many on social media, and really this happened after the previous election, people got more vocal who were more progressive, and that's been intriguing to me. So I think there's room for dialogue in my hometown, and so I hope there is in yours too. Okay, sorry, I went off on a soapboxy tangenty thing, but I'm back. So in writing the end of this, I didn't want to use tokens. I didn't want to be stereotypical. I want to make people think and listen and consider. And so that's what I was going for. Let me find a couple places I wanted to point out. There go the grooms, they've come in, right? And nobody will bake their wedding cake. And well, Beulah had agreed to bake the wedding cake, but she doesn't bake for our kind. And so it's like this last minute thing. So, and I don't want to get political about this because I just don't think it's a political issue, but she's baking a cake. She's not like presiding over the wedding. So that's what I wanted Amanda Jane to kind of feel, because that's a response that I hear a lot. So, and I wanted Misty to have her moment of like, as well, because, you know, she knows where she lives too. But anyway, the parts that I really love at the end here are, oh, here we go. When Beulah comes in and confronts her, and Beulah says, maybe where you come from, people don't take the word of God so seriously anymore, but here we do. And she says, this is where I come from, Beulah. And I do take it very seriously. I also take care for human beings seriously, and I take business seriously. And I can tell you right now that not only is the Lord himself grateful that I'm making this wedding cake, he's wholly disappointed in you for showing hatred in his name rather than love. And I think that I worked really hard on that section, and because I wanted to word it just right. I want to word it as not to say outright, this union is ordained by God. Like, I'm not trying to make a religious statement either. I'm trying to make a statement about dignity and humanity and love for people. And so I chose those words that the Lord himself is grateful I'm making the wedding cake. And I chose the word grateful very specifically because her whole point is that I take care for human beings seriously. And so I wanted her to tap into that whole idea that God is a heavenly father to all, and he made us and loves us, made us and claims us and loves us. And I wanted all that in there, that she's not trying to do a religious act by making this wedding cake. She's trying to have good business. It's business, it's a wedding cake, and to do right by people. So I was really careful because I didn't want to come across as a religious statement about this, but more as, listen, I care about people and caring for people and walking with them, and I'm gonna make the cake. And she says, besides Beulah, since when is making a wedding cake a sanctified cake? It's a cake. And I'm making a damn good one too. Now, if that's all you came to say, I appreciate you're looking out for my business and my soul, but I have a little more faith in this town than you do, and I believe they'll admire what I'm doing. And she says, oh, you poor misguided girl. I don't know what else I should have expected from a woman who's dating one man and was still married to another. If I'd been less of a lady, I would have hurled a fork at her self-righteous face. And so and I put that in there too, just to show that Beulah, it's not this one issue for Beulah. It's anyone who doesn't come across as a God-fearing, sort of Old Testament following Christian, like, or person, that bothers her. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want it to be this one issue. I wanted it to be various things. And so she says, you know, she leaves. Man Jane says, Beulah, you may leave my store and never come back, but rest assured I'll be praying for you, that you come to realize the world's a pretty great place with a lot of loving people in it. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted the scene to be, that the world is actually a pretty great place with a lot of loving people in it. So often we only hear about the people who don't love, and we've heard about them a lot lately, and it's frightening and it's scary, but I know so many people who love. You know so many people who love. So let's raise up with our loving voices. You know, let's just love people. Let's leave judgments to other people. Let's leave all of that aside and just fill this world. And right now, let's fill this country with love. That's why I celebrate Pride, because I believe that I'm meant to love people and as they are. And so I do, and I try to, and to support people. And we need more of that. So that's what I was trying to go for with this particular example. I wanted to, and I threw in the bit about the gambler with Kenny Rogers, because that's just really one of the best country songs ever. You gotta know when, okay, anyway, I'll stop. But anyway, and so I wanted this beautiful wedding, and I wanted her to have this moment where she looked around and saw people. What impressed me most of all was that these people had driven out of their way to celebrate Patrick and Taylor. It warmed my heart to know that my town was not defined by the likes of Beulah May Foxfire now, she was clearly in a class by herself. And then people come and ask for a business card and everything. And once again, like, I didn't want to demonize Beulah, but it's just a different way of, it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way you were raised without going through some self-reflection later. I mean, a lot of us were raised with ideas that we don't hold now because we took the time and the effort to go through self-reflection. And I think that's so important. And we all have to do it. It's okay to question the way you were raised. It's okay to question, the beliefs and values with which you were raised. I mean, if you question them and come back to them, then affirmation, and you know that you did the work to affirm your belief in those things. And if you inspect yourself and find that it's something different, then that's good too, because that's your authentic heart. So you need to know who you are, what you believe in, and that helps us interact with people and chart our own paths forward too. So that's what I wanted. And then the very end of the book, which I love, the last scene with her and her mom. I love this relationship, and a lot of it is because of my relationship with my grandmother, who I lost in December. But I just, like I said before, I wanted it to be this quiet moment, and I wanted the mom to be so proud of her and who she is. And just you. She's laughing, and Mansion's like, "What are you laughing at?" Just you, my girl, just you. You and your country boy and your small town bakery. God almighty, I never thought I'd see the day. Yeah, me neither. My baby girl making homemade cakes and Divinity with the best of them. Yeah, well, that Divinity was a battle, and I'm downright ashamed of all the eggs and sugar I wasted in the process. I didn't think it'd ever turn out right. My mother turned to me, her eyes shining in the moonlight. Now that I'm thinking about sugar, life's a lot like Divinity. I couldn't help but chuckle. Well, this one I've got to hear. Don't you laugh at me, Miss Chris. You see, with Divinity, just like this one life we got, you gotta create the right atmosphere, you gotta have just enough patience, you gotta know how to add a little flair with the spoon. She stubbed out her cigarette. Sure, it's gonna kick you in the ass once in a while, but the rest of the time, it's gonna turn out pretty sweet. In that moment, sitting in the darkness with the chill of winter whipping against my skin, the wisdom of my mother filled me with warmth, and on that cold winter night, I knew unequivocally, this is where I belonged. True words, Mama. Those sure true words indeed. Let the choir say amen. That's one of those things that I wrote, and I read it now and I'm like, wow, you wrote that. Like, you did it. Like, you let it come through you and you listened. To be a writer, you have to know how to be quiet and how to listen. And if you're fortunate enough to be published, I think that's confirmation that you did those things correctly. So this little book, I'm going to end this segment with a story. So this little book has caused me a lot of heartache over the past year and a half. So as I've mentioned here, I was a teacher for 15 years, 14 at the same place. And while I was teaching, I was writing Sweet Divinity. And I had a lot of student input on it, and some of them are watching now. Thank you. Like, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And it was a job I loved. I loved teaching. I taught American literature for all 14 years in some form or other. And that was great. And it's funny because when I was in graduate school, I was planning to go get a doctorate in Victorian literature. And then my life path changed, and I went to grad school, and I started taking all these British classes, but I ended up really just loving Southern American literature because there's such a complex, rich history in the South, which I've talked about before. And so it was funny because when I got the job teaching American literature, I remember being like, ugh, American, but I guess I'll do it. I think because I had only been taught in the Western canon, I didn't realize the rich complexity of voices that are there in the Southern segment. And so there was a lot of discovery for me when I was preparing to teach and throughout the years that I taught. But I love teaching because I love literature, but I also just love working with young people. I love guiding and trying to help and affirming and trying to help them love themselves and to be confident going out into the world. Because when I left for college, man, I was anything but confident. I was terrified and had no real sense of who I was. And so I loved mentoring young people. So about a year ago, the school I taught at was religiously affiliated. And a little bit over a year ago, I started, one of my colleagues began to go complain about about what she thought I was doing in my classroom, what she thought I was saying to people, some things I had put on my social media that were nothing, like a picture of me with Elizabeth Warren because she was in town, and yeah, I'll go meet a presidential candidate, thank you. When I was in college, I went and met John McCain. So anyway, and so I started lodging some complaints, and they were really unfounded. They were assumptions of what I was doing and what I wasn't doing. I had given a talk at school to like a Friday morning group of students who would gather, and they would have people come and give religious talks. And so I went and gave one of those, and I talked about how you love all people, and just, you know, what my message always is about the dignity of people. And I was called out by this colleague for that too, because I had included the LGBTQIA community in my list of descriptors of folks that we should love and respect and treat with dignity. And it was a really confusing time for me because I've helped a lot of, let's just get specific for a minute. I think I've helped a lot of kids who are members of the LGBTQI community in the 15 years I've been teaching. And when I say helped, I just mean showing them love, I love you for you. I think you're great. I love you for who you are, right? That's it. But the things I was being accused of were beyond that and would have been inappropriate for me to say to any student. So that's all well and good. But then someone went forth to complain about the book. Do we know what's in this book? And thus began a really dark time in my life when this goal I've always had of being published suddenly became, if I accomplish that goal, then I think I have to leave a job that I love. And it was a really, really dark time, and it was so frustrating for me because I think that this book is a giant book of love. That's what I want it to be, just full of love for everything, love for nature and the environment, love for home, love for small towns, love for food, love for family, love for faith, love for bees, love for all. I want it to be a big book of love. And even, you know, the way she deals with Beulah, she doesn't hate Beulah. Beulah frustrates her to no end, but I don't know that there's any hatred between Amanda Jane and Beulah. And I'm excited to explore that in the next book. They're dynamic. And so it was a very confusing time for me because I've prided myself on always just showing all of my students love and affirmation. When you're a teenager, I don't know how y'all were as teenagers, but I was a wreck. Like, I was a wreck. I lacked so much confidence and self-esteem. It's horrifying when I look back at who I was and the things I did and the things I said and I felt about myself. And I also see that that's when my anxiety was really going strong, and I just didn't know that. And I wasn't dealing with issues regarding my sexuality or gender. No. And I can't imagine adding that on top and then having people reject you. So I've always tried to be an all-encompassing person, and I think that's why it hit so hard. So I ended up leaving my job teaching because I didn't believe that I would be supported when the book came out. And I wanted to be able to celebrate this book without, I just wanted to be able to open my arms and celebrate this book. I mean, I've worked on it for so long. This has been a goal of mine for as long as I wanted to be a teacher, I've wanted to be a writer. And I also wanted to be able to speak freely about my love for people, for all people. And I knew that if I continued, that colleague would never leave me alone and would read into everything I've said with a lens that would somehow make it wrong. So, so this book it's been a dramatic one, this experience. The greatest affirmation, there's been a lot of great affirmation, but one of the greatest I received was going to my book signing, and I sold 142 books that day, and 98% of them were former students of mine who came to buy the book. So that was really affirming. But so now I feel like I am a person, I really believe that my calling is to stand up for all people and to ensure justice, fair treatment, equality of all people, period. And so that's what I'm going to do. So Sweet Divinity was not meant to be a political book or really even like it wasn't meant to be a comment on religion. Like that wasn't it. I'm a words person. If I have something I want to say on those issues, I'm going to straight up say it. So it was strange to me that the last 15 pages of the book became what it was all about. And I think that's missing the point entirely. But anyway, so I thought you might be intrigued by that little tale with Sweet Divinity. So, but now, fortunately, I have a lot of freedom to write. I can write what I wish to write, how I wish to write it, the messaging I want to get across, and I will continue always to focus on love. So I hope you enjoyed Sweet Divinity. It's not what I normally write, so I am going to write a sequel, but I typically write much darker, gothic-y things. And so I'm working on some of that too. So if that's more your speed and you just read this because you like me or whatever reason, like, thank you. And I got something for you coming up. All right. So our next book is going to be Beloved by Toni Morrison. This is, there are a few books that I have read that I would call masterpieces. The first book I ever read that I finished and I thought, oh my gosh, like for the first time, I get it. I get what a masterpiece is the book Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. That book is hugely important. He's a Black writer, or was, he's passed away now. His last book that he was working on when he passed away was called Juneteenth, and it's published. It's not completely finished, but that's published too. But Invisible Man is like the magnum opus. Like it's amazing. And the book it's not the Invisible Man H.G. Wells. It's not what you might be thinking of. Invisible Man, he's invisible because he's Black and people just choose not to see him. That book affected me so deeply, and it's truly a masterpiece. But I'm going to start with a Black female writer, and I'm going to start with Toni Morrison because it's just so beautiful, y'all. And it's also a good book to really talk about how we read and to learn active reading and finding symbolism and deriving theme and all those things. So Sweet Divinity has been fun, and I hope that I gave you a little bit more insight into the writing process talking about Sweet Divinity. But now I want to jump back in the boat we were in with Lord of the Rings and talk a little bit about how to read using this book. So with that said, we're going to read pages 1 through 63 for next week, which sounds like a lot. It's really not. It's just a little piece of this big old book, because I don't want to go too far without coming together and really talking about it. You can see my love for this book. I mean, there's notes all over this puppy, and that's how you know I really loved a book, as if I wrote all over it. So we're going to discuss that next week. So come on, stay tuned. Post any questions you have onto Facebook or Instagram, or you can post them to this video as well, and post questions about Sweet Divinity that I might not have answered. And then I'm going to leave you with a poem today, and I'm going to read it off my computer. So if it looks like I'm like, that's why. But with Sweet Divinity, we've talked a lot about growing up and going back where you came from and all of that. So I thought this was a pretty perfect poem to end with. It's one of my favorites. It's my favorite Robert Frost poem. It's called Birches. And actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a screen share because I want you to see it. Okay, let's see. All right. I want you to see it because we've talked a little bit about form in poetry, and this one's written in just this one sort of chunk. And it's also written in blank verse. Robert Frost really loved blank verse. And blank verse is not free verse. Free verse is like E.E. Cummings or Carl Sandburg, where there's no rhyme, no rhythm, no nothing. Blank verse is different. Blank verse is unrhymed iambic pentameter. So da 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 da, right? So that's the rhythm of the poem. But it doesn't rhyme, so it doesn't come across as sing-songy, but it still has that internal rhythm of the meter. All right, this is Birches by Robert Frost. When I see birches bend to left and right across the lines of straighter dark trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. The swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. They clicked upon themselves as the breeze rises, and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust, such heaps of broken glass to sweep away you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They're dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they are bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them as he went out and in to fetch the cows. Some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one, he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp, not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. Then he flung outward, feet first with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself, a swinger of birches. So I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. I love this poem. There's some lines I really love. I love the line toward the beginning. Let's see if I can find it. Here, as the breeze rises and turn many-colored, as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel, that alliteration there, cracks and crazes, I just love it. You can hear it. You can hear the crack of it. So lovely. The beauty of soon the sun's warmth will make them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. It's a violent thing, but it just sounds so beautiful, the way that he writes. I love how he uses his punctuation and stops us in the middle of a line instead of having the lines end at the end of, having the sentences end at the end of the lines all the way through. It helps you read the poem more slowly and to pause. There's lots of onomatopoeia in here, which are the sounds, the words that sound like sounds, like click, click makes a clicking sound. Beautiful imagery, all kinds in here. And I love the image of the tree, right? Growing up from its roots and up, 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 up toward heaven, which really is very much sort of like a metaphor for life, right? That we start on this earth and we're continuously growing up, 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 up until we return, theoretically, metaphorically, to this place high above and outside. It's so lovely. There's some beautiful images here about youth as well. The girls that are throwing their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun, right? Because they're wet. Boys climbing trees. I mean, these sort of quintessential images of childhood. And there's this great line, which is sort of the turn of the poem, because he gets really carried away in these lovely images of childhood. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, right? And truth is capitalized. He personifies truth, and then goes back to the sort of matter of fact, right? That he was speaking metaphorically and figuratively, and then truth came in with its matter of factness. So this poem's also about the sort of a figurative life we have, and then reality. And so he talks about the boy subduing the trees and playing by himself as well. So that aspect of imagination that we associate with childhood. And then in him conquering the trees, right, which is sort of a typical child's game of going and being the conqueror and being the dominant. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon, and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground, right? And how he would climb so carefully. It's like when you're filling a cup to the brim, right? Or even like above the brim, you know, and you fill the cup and it's the surface tension's holding it and it's just right above your brim. You're like, why is it not falling over? And then as soon as you pick it up, it's like, but anyway. But so with what care he climbed the trees, not to destroy the tree, not to pull it all the way down, but just to bend it back to earth. You know, there's, hold on. So was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to me. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. That's a really long sentence. He doesn't have a lot of those in there. But this idea of going back to being a swinger of birches, and you know, that's youthfulness and childhood, and there's a weariness about being an adult. And you know, life is like a pathless wood where your face is burns, and I think that's a great description of life. And that's not to freak anybody out who's like on the edge of adulthood. There's a lot of great things about being an adult, but it's once again this difference between imagination or metaphor, figurative, and reality, matter of fact about the ice storm. And I mean, perhaps we all long sometimes to go back to our youth. I would also say that great line when he's like, but hang on, because I don't mean I want to die and like never come back to earth. I'm saying basically like sort of like this idea of reincarnation. Like I would love to be born anew and live that way again. And so, but the best line, earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. That's beautiful. Earth's the right place for love. It's this call to love and to be and to live in this kind of authentic way, like children. I mean, I could take this farther, you know, that children love so much, and love without condition and stereotype and all those things that society brings and age bring and place before them. Anyway, and so I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow white trunk toward heaven, right? Not to heaven, toward, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again, right? So it's this idea of reincarnation, coming back. That'd be good, both going, right? Climbing the tree, the beauty of doing that, and coming back to youth. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. There's a lot more to say about this poem, but I'll leave it there for now. I hope that illuminates a little bit for you. I will say that, and I probably said this before, but if you read a poem and you have no earthly idea what that poem's about, you should look for patterns of diction. What kinds of words are in here? This poem has a lot of words about youth and growth and journeys and sort of a cycle. And so you can sometimes see those patterns in the words and then formulate that into an understanding of what the poem means. All right, so that's it for today. I look forward to seeing you next week where we'll discuss the first part of Beloved by Toni Morrison. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for tuning in, and keep reading. And remember, as you always should, words matter.